Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine you are standing outside. The sky is normal, the air is calm. Birds are singing somewhere nearby. And then, without any warning at all, everything changes. The sky turns green. The air goes completely still. And somewhere in the distance, you hear it. A sound like a freight train, getting louder, getting closer, getting bigger. Nature does not send warnings. Nature does not negotiate. Nature does not care. But the 7 people in this video, they look nature directly in the face, and they refuse to die. These are their stories. Let's begin. March 29, 2006, it was a perfectly ordinary Wednesday evening in Fordland, Missouri. 19-year-old Matt Suter was inside his grandmother's mobile home. The television was on. Dinner had just been eaten. Outside the windows, the sky had been getting darker for the last hour. But that was normal in Missouri in late March. Storms came and went. This one was different. Matt looked out the window and felt something cold move through him. The sky had turned green. Not gray, not black. Anyone who has ever lived in tornado country knows what that color means. It means run. It means now. It means do not wait for another second. Matt ran for the door. The tornado, later classified as an EF2 with wind speeds of over 100 miles per hour, hit the mobile home before Matt could reach safety. In an instant, the entire structure was picked up off the ground like a piece of paper in the wind. He was sucked out through a window, still wrapped inside a lampshade that had been on the table beside him, and hurled through the open air. He felt nothing. He saw nothing. He was simply gone. When Matt opened his eyes, he was lying in a field, alone, minor injury on forehead. The night air quiet around him. No mobile home, no grandmother's street, nothing familiar anywhere. He had no memory of flying at all. Rescue workers found him and measured the distance between where the mobile home had stood and where Matt's body had landed. 398 meters. He became the longest distance human being ever carried by a tornado and survived, a record that still stands today and is officially recognized by the Guinness World Records. He walked away with a head wound. From the sky turning green on a Wednesday evening to waking up in a field with a world record and no memory of how he got there. Story 2. You see, there is a particular kind of stubbornness that only comes with age, the kind that says, I have been in this house for 30 years. I have seen storms come and go. I am not leaving. 73-year-old Molly DeLucia had that stubbornness in abundance. When the evacuation orders came for Mexico Beach, Florida, on October 9, 2018, her neighbors packed their cars and left. One by one, the street emptied. People called her, begged her, told her this one was different. She stayed. She had her cat. She had her home. She was not going anywhere. The next morning, Hurricane Michael made landfall. Not as a Category 3, not as a Category 4, but Category 5, the most powerful hurricane ever recorded to hit the Florida Panhandle in all of American history. Wind speeds of 160 miles per hour. A storm surge, a wall of ocean water pushed inland by the storm, of 14 feet. In minutes, the entire ground floor of Molly's home disappeared beneath the surge. The water came in under the doors first, then through the windows. Then it simply rose, fast and cold and unstoppable, filling every room on the ground floor in what felt like seconds. Molly grabbed her cat and climbed. She made it to her attic, and there she stayed. For 2 full days, Molly DeLucia sat in her attic as Hurricane Michael destroyed everything around her. She had no food, no power, no phone signal, no way to tell anyone she was alive. Outside her attic window, her entire neighborhood had ceased to exist. Every home on her street had been flattened to its concrete foundation. Mexico Beach looked like the surface of the moon, but Molly's house, for reasons nobody has ever fully explained, was still standing. When rescue workers finally reached her on the second day, they heard a sound coming from inside the only structure left on the block. They broke through, climbed it up, and found Molly DeLucia, sitting perfectly calmly in her attic chair, her cat in her lap, her hands folded. She looked up at the rescuers, and she said, I knew someone would come. From the most powerful hurricane in Florida Panhandle history, to sitting calmly in an attic with a cat, waiting for the knock that she never doubted would come. The next story begins with a car stuck in snow. It ends with doctors who could not explain how a human being was still alive. December 2011. A remote forest road in rural Sweden. Peter Skyllberg was driving when his car became stuck in deep snow. Not a little stuck. Completely, utterly, hopelessly stuck. Buried up to the windows with more snow falling every minute. He had no phone signal. He had a sleeping bag. He had almost no food. And nobody, not a single person on earth, knew where he was. The temperature outside was dropping fast. By the time night fell, it was minus 20 degrees Celsius. Then minus 25. Then minus 30. Peter Skyllberg made a decision. He was not going to try to walk out. In those temperatures, on that road, with no idea how far the nearest town was, walking out would kill him faster than staying. He crawled into his sleeping bag on the back seat, and he did the only thing he could do. He waited. He melted snow in his hands for water. He rationed every last crumb of food he had until it was gone, and then he had nothing. He stayed as still as possible to preserve body heat. He breathed slowly. He kept his sleeping bag pulled tight. The snow kept falling. Days passed. Then weeks. The car disappeared completely under the snow, invisible from the road above. No passing driver would ever have known it was there. Peter lost track of time. Then on a day in February, more than 2 months after he had first become stuck, a man on a snowmobile noticed something unusual just barely poking above the surface of the snow. The very tip of a car roof. He stopped, got off his snowmobile, brushed the snow away from the window, and looked inside. Peter Skyllberg looked back at him, alive, weak beyond words, but alive. He was rushed to hospital, severely malnourished, on the edge of organ failure, but breathing. The doctors who treated him gathered around his chart in genuine disbelief. His core body temperature had dropped so low, for so long, that the only medical comparisons they could find was animal hibernation. Peter's body had done something extraordinary. It had slowed itself down, reduced its own metabolism to the absolute bare minimum, burned almost nothing, preserved itself. Like a bear in winter, Peter Skyllberg had not survived the cold. Story 4. Imagine standing on the side of a motorway, cars passing at 60 miles per hour. Now imagine that instead of cars, it is a wall of fire, taller than a 3-story building, roaring with a sound like the world ending, coming directly at you. That is what Tom Hansen turned around to face. February 7, 2009, Victoria, Australia, Black Saturday. The deadliest wildfire in Australian history. 173 people dead. Over 1 million acres burned. Entire towns gone in less than an hour. Tom was just a ranch hand checking his fences on a hot summer morning when he smelled smoke. He dismissed it. Smoke was common in summer. Then he turned around. The entire horizon was on fire. Not a distant glow, not a thin line of orange. A wall, solid, enormous, moving faster than his brain could process. He ran to his truck. He turned the key. The engine clicked once, then silence, so he ran, on foot, through open farmland. No cover anywhere. The heat blistering the skin on his shoulders while he was still moving. He was not going to outrun this fire. He knew it. Then he saw it. A concrete irrigation channel. Old, half filled with muddy brown water, barely a meter deep. He did not hesitate. He threw himself in and pushed his face beneath the surface, gripping the concrete edges with both hands. The fire passed directly over him. The water heated up around him. The roar above was deafening even underwater. He held his breath. He held on. And then, slowly, the roaring faded. He came up for air. The world above him was black and burning in every direction, but he was breathing. He lay in that channel for 4 hours, until it was safe to stand up. Then he stood up, from a wall of fire at 60 miles per hour, to breathing underwater while the world burned above him. Story 5. Some people are unlucky. Roy Sullivan was in a category all by himself. Roy was a park ranger, a quiet man who spent his life walking through the forests and mountains of Shenandoah National Park. But lightning had other plans. Between 1942 and 1977, lightning struck Roy Sullivan 7 separate times. 7 documented, verified strikes. The first time, it took his big toenail. The second time, it burned his eyebrows completely off. Then it seared his shoulder, set his hair on fire, twice, and left him with burns across his body. He once had to pour an entire canteen of water over his own head while standing on a trail just to stop the flames. By the 7th strike, people started to fear him. Hikers would change direction when they saw him coming. Even on clear sunny days, nobody wanted to stand too close to Roy Sullivan. Just in case. Roy never understood why lightning kept choosing him. But he also never stopped going back into the forest. From a park ranger who kept getting struck by lightning again and again, to becoming the most lightning-struck and luckiest man who ever lived. Story 6. There is a particular kind of silence that follows a catastrophe. Not peaceful silence, not quiet silence, the silence of absence, of things that were there, and suddenly are not. Tami Oldham was 23 years old when she sailed into that silence. September 11th, 1983, the Pacific Ocean. Tami and her fiancé Richard Sharp were 29 days into what was supposed to be the journey of a lifetime, sailing their 44-foot yacht Hazana from Tahiti to San Diego. The ocean had been kind to them. The sky had been blue. They were young and in love, and the world felt enormous and wonderful. Then the weather reports changed. Hurricane Raymond, Category 4, moving directly toward them. They tried to outrun it. They couldn't. The storm arrived in the night, faster and more violent than anything either of them had experienced at sea. Waves of 40 feet, winds of 150 miles per hour. The Hazana was thrown around the ocean like a toy. Richard tied himself to the deck to manage the sails and told Tami to go below. She went below. The last thing she remembered was the sound of water. Everywhere, all at once. A rogue wave. A single monstrous wall of water moving at an angle different from the rest of the storm, struck the Hazana with such force that the entire boat rolled completely upside down. Tami was thrown across the cabin. Everything went black. When she opened her eyes, she did not know how much time had passed. 27 hours. She had been unconscious for 27 hours. She pulled herself up slowly, every part of her body aching, and looked around at the wreckage of the cabin. The mast was gone. She could see the sky through the broken hull above her. The radio was a pile of sparking debris. The emergency position beacon was gone. She called Richard's name. Nothing. She climbed up through the wreckage to the deck and looked out at the ocean in every direction. Richard Sharp was never found. Tami Oldham was alone, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, on a broken, mastless, engineless boat, with no way to communicate with anyone on Earth. She sat down on the deck of the Hazana, and she cried until she had nothing left. And then she stood up. She had a sextant, an old-fashioned navigation instrument that uses the angle of the sun and stars to calculate position. She had the stars. She had what remained of her supplies. She set a course for Hilo, Hawaii, 5,500 miles away. For 41 days, Tami Oldham sailed alone. She rationed her food. She navigated entirely by the stars at night and the sun during the day. She talked to Richard, out loud, on the deck, in the dark, because the silence was the hardest thing of all. On day 41, she saw land. Hilo, Hawaii. She had crossed 500 miles of open Pacific Ocean, alone, on a broken boat, with nothing but a sextant and the stars and the absolute refusal to give up. Tami Oldham Ashcraft later wrote a memoir about what happened. It was turned into a major Hollywood film. She said, "The hardest moment was not the hurricane. It was not the 41 days alone. It was hearing the silence after she called Richard's name, and choosing to stand up anyway. From losing everything in one rogue wave in the middle of the night, to sailing 500 miles home on nothing but stars and the decision to keep going." Story 7. Eric LeMarque had spent his whole life moving fast. As a professional ice hockey player, he had played at the highest levels of the sport. Fast, physical, fearless. After his playing career ended, he had found snowboarding. Another way to go fast, to feel the mountain beneath him, to push himself to the edge of what was possible. On a February morning in 2004 at Mammoth Mountain in California, he pushed too far. He had been snowboarding alone on a back run when the whiteout hit. Not a gradual darkening, not a gentle snowfall. A sudden, total, absolute whiteout. Visibility dropping to near zero in minutes as a full Sierra Nevada blizzard descended without warning. Eric made a wrong turn, then another. By the time the storm eased enough for him to see more than 10 feet in any direction, he was on the wrong side of the mountain, completely alone. No phone signal, no other skiers anywhere. The resort, and warmth and safety and help, was somewhere on the other sides of a mountain he could no longer navigate. It was minus 26 degrees Celsius. Eric LeMarque spent 8 days on that mountain. 8 days. He ate pine bark he stripped from trees with his bare hands. He melted snow in his mouth for water. He built crude shelters from branches and snow. He moved constantly, because stopping meant freezing. On the 5th day, he found his iPod in his jacket pocket. Not for music. He held it up in the air, rotating slowly, and discovered that its FM radio receiver could pick up a faint signal from a radio station somewhere in the valley below. A tiny ghost of a signal, barely there, but there, a direction. Eric LeMarque used an iPod as a compass. He moved toward the signal, faint as it was, unreliable as it was. It was the only information he had about which way was civilization. On the 8th day, rescue teams found him stumbling through the snow. Both his feet were black, not frost-bitten, not damaged, black, completely. The tissue destroyed beyond saving. Both feet were amputated. Eric LeMarque lost his feet on that mountain. But he found something else. He said it in every interview afterward, that losing his feet gave him more perspective than 20 years of professional sport had ever managed, that the mountain had taken something from him and given him something bigger in return. He became a motivational speaker, a Paralympic athlete. He wrote a book. He coaches young athletes. He moves fast. Still, just differently now. From a wrong turn in a whiteout blizzard at minus 26 degrees, to finding direction with an iPod, and a whole new life on the other side of the mountain. Nature is the most powerful force on earth, but these 7 people looked it in the face and refused to die. Stubbornness sometimes wins. If this gave you goosebumps, like the videos, subscribe, and comment. Which survival story shocked you the most? Stay hopeful, King.